What are you hearing? Is morale at Apple low?
Well, the stock price obviously contributes to declining morale. When you think about in the past 10 years or so what people are really proud to say they worked at Apple for, the iPad, the first iPhone, these revolutionary products, Steve Jobs, they've certainly fallen into kind of a predictable release cycle of new products in the fall, WWDC in the spring, and it's not quite as exciting as it once was for Apple employees. So, yeah, they're looking elsewhere.
So how important is being at an innovative company versus the stock price and money?
Sure. There are no shortage of innovative companies in the Valley. Now, one thing day-to-day when you're working at Apple, there's no such thing as a free lunch there. They don't have a lot of those same amazing perks like free lunches that you find at Google, Facebook, now even Yahoo. And
so you have to pay for your lunch at Apple.
You pay for your lunch at Apple, and normally the stock price would compensate for being able to afford things like that. When you suddenly take those things away, that kind of compensation doesn't look like such a great idea anymore.
Why doesn't Apple offer more of those kind of perks?
I think it's a company philosophy thing. Now that Tim Cook is in charge, there have been some changes. Really interesting things like matching employee charitable donation contributions dollar for dollar. They've really increased the employee discount for Apple products, which wasn't that great beforehand, but that's just not enough to really push over the edge for the culture.
How much do you think the fact that Steve Jobs is no longer there, does that have something to do with it, and morale being low, as you say?
I think it's been enough time by now that in the last year or so, if that were a huge factor for people staying at Apple, they would have made the move already. I think now it has to do with what other companies are starting to do and looking elsewhere for the most innovative product they can possibly work on.
So where are they looking?
Google's a great example. When you think about the things that have come out recently, Glass, Loon, self-driving cars, people are saying, Google's making what? Wow. And we haven't seen that from Apple in the last few years. When Google can push things out several times a year, and Apple has a pretty predictable product line with these launches going every few years, then they're looking at Google for that.
So right now you would say Google has an edge on Apple in terms of being the most desirable place to work?
Highly dependent on what you're doing for a living. If you're really focused on UI, mobile, if you're a graphic designer, Apple's doing some pretty impressive things, in particular with iOS 7, that people may not be as tempted to go to Google for. Or they may look at a company like Facebook if you're really interested in user interface design.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you about Facebook, because Facebook's been accused of copying, not just Google, but Twitter. And, just last week, Instagram video, people saying that looks a lot like Vine. Malik was on the show, and he's had to rack his brain for the last time that Facebook really did something innovative, in his opinion.
Sure. I think comparing Facebook as an employer to Google or Apple, I think Google or Apple in terms of world-changing, the really, really amazing things that are improving the world, they've got Facebook beat there. But when you think about, Google was not the first search engine, Apple was not the first computer. We're looking at Facebook's kind of similarity to existing products at the feature level and at this very, very day-to-day use level. But when you think about the core ideas, Gmail wasn't the first mail, iPhone, there were other phones like that before.
You had an interesting tweet a few days ago. You said The Internship, which is the movie about a Google internship, should have a sequel about life at Facebook for the rest of those Google kids rejected. Do you think of Facebook employees as Google rejects, or
I didn't think that tweet would surface here and come back to haunt me in this forum. But traditionally, yes, to be totally honest with you, in the same way that a lot of people that weren't interested in working at Google or weren't doing as well ended up going to startups, Facebook, at that time maybe didn't have as much of the cred, and that kind of continued on. I think for new grads, Facebook does hire a ton of engineers and a lot of people that have experience at Google. Not necessarily anything wrong with that. My tweet was a little off color there, but when you think about talent shifts, look at me going from Google to Twitter to Foursquare. Wonderful companies. I'm just more interested in getting in on the ground floor. Facebook still offers that to some extent compared to Google.
What about Yahoo? Is Yahoo earning some of its prestige back, or is Yahoo still sort of a last choice?
I think it's safe to say that Yahoo is. I think that the value proposition for someone leaving a company like Google to go to Yahoo would be they are presented with a unique opportunity that they would not experience anywhere else, and they realize they're taking a gamble.